Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make sourdough discard scones with chocolate chips, and then we are going to do 3 different grilled cheeses using 3 different Swedish cheeses that I picked up at IKEA this weekend. So we're going to start by making the base for our sourdough scones. So I am going to start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to do our dry ingredients in the big bowl, and our wet will be in the smaller bowl. So 1 and 2. So we have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And then we are going to add in a ½ teaspoon of salt. So let me get my ½ teaspoon out. And perfect. And then we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I had to get a new one. I finally ran out. I feel like sometimes you have baking powder and baking soda and they last for ages. And when you run out, you're like, oh, I'm out. So we need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So 1, 2. Not baking soda. Otherwise, you'll have poofy scones. And then I'm just going to give this a quick little stir with my pastry cutter. It's just easy to cut it in there. And then we are going to cut in 1 stick of cold butter. You got to use cold butter because you don't want them to mush together. Otherwise, you'll get like scones that are as hard as a rock. So nice cold butter, which will give you your nice kind of soft, tender, and nice like crumb to your scones. So I'm just chopping this up and adding it in here. And then we'll go over with our pastry cutter and chop it up until we have cut the butter into pieces smaller than a pea. But I find it is best to give it a little chop first because it's a lot harder to chop up a full stick than it is pieces. So we're going to use our pastry cutter, which is essentially, this is our pastry cutter right here. It's got like 5 blades, almost like, it's the brass knuckles of baking. And we're just going to cut it into our flour. So that's all we're doing is pushing down into the butter over and over until it is all cut up into pieces smaller than a pea. And this is the same thing you would do if you were making biscuits or pie crust or pastry crust. You cut your flour and your butter into the flour. Now, you can always use a food processor for this if you want to. I just find that this doesn't take a super long amount of time, and it's really easy to clean up. You can just toss these things in the dishwasher, and that's all it is. It doesn't take much real estate up in the dishwasher as opposed to a food processor. Because there you have the blade, you have the little plastic container, you have the lid, the push down thing. So I just find that this is easy and just takes a little elbow grease. But we're going to cut our butter into our flour until we have no pieces bigger than a pea. If you have chunks bigger than it, then you'll get like a butter pocket, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it just won't give you a nice, consistent scone all around. There we go. Almost done. Just going to go through with my knife, just get out any butter that kind of likes to stick in between the blades. And then we are almost done. Maybe about 30 more seconds of cutting the butter into the flour. It doesn't take hardly any time. I feel like it would take more time to get your food processor out and to blend it than it would be to just cut this up. There we go. So we've got our butter cut into our flour mixture. And now we're going to do our wet mixture, and then we'll fold them together. So we are going to start with a ½ cup of sourdough discard. And so I'm going to give this a nice stir because sometimes when you have your discard, a little hooch or the stuff from the fermentation process can come up to the top. So I always give it a nice little stir. And then we're going to put in a ½ cup of discard.
You have a question? Do you have a cookbook?
I do not have a cookbook. A lot of people have asked if I would do that. I do post recipe cards on like the link through our page. And then of course we post the videos, but if everybody's been asking, to make a cookbook. So I said, I might have to sit down and do something like that in my spare time, which is none. Okay, so let me put in here, we have our half a cup of our sourdough discard. It could be active if you have it. It doesn't matter. We're not using it for the rising process. Then we are going to add in 1 egg. Here we go. And some vanilla. We're going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And these are going to be for our chocolate chip scones if you came in late. So 2 teaspoons of vanilla. 1, 2. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. And you've got to use cream. You can't really use milk because you want the fat from it. You could always use sour cream. You'd need like 1/4 cup around that. You'd need a little bit more for it. So 1. And here is our 2 things of it. And I am going to just mix it up a little. I'll pop my yolk and mix this together. And then we're going to add in some sugar too here. There we go. So make sure you pop your yolk when you mix it up. And then we're just going to stir this. You want to make sure your wet mixture is well mixed before you put it in there, because with scones, just like with biscuits and pie crust, you don't want to over mix it. Otherwise, you're going to get a really stiff dough or stiff product. And we want to have a nice, light, fluffy scone. Okay, so we're going to add in 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. So let me get that.
You have a comment here. Someone made the green beans last night and said they were delicious.
Oh, great. I know. Those are one of my favorite green bean recipes. They're super simple, super easy, but they're just so much better than like steamed green beans or the microwave ones. They're just nice and delicious. Okay, so I've mixed my salt in here. And now we are going to add our wet mixture to our dry mixture very carefully. We don't want to overcrowd it too much, over mix it too much, because if you do, you'll get a nice stiff scone, which is not nearly as good as a nice fluffy scone. Okay, so here is our wet mixture, and I'm just going to carefully kind of fold our flour into it. Just like this. And remember, your dough is going to be a bit more dry than like if you're making like a cookie or whatnot, which is what you want, because that gives you that nice kind of crunch on your thing. So here we've got kind of our shaggy mix, which is where I want to start. Now we're going to add in our chocolate chips. We want about 1 cup of chocolate chips. I have a little bit of leftovers from some. So this is about 1/2 cup of regular sized chocolate chips. And then we're going to use some mini chocolate chips because we're just going to use up what we have. And I'm just eyeballing it here. You know, you can never have too many chocolate chips. So you want about 1 cup of chocolate chips, and we're just going to slightly mix these in, and then we're going to do our press and fold out on the counter. But we're just going to do a nice light mix first. Perfect. Now I'm going to put my whole shaggy dough out onto the counter. It's going to look like it's crumbly and dry. That's what you want, because you want the nice flaky layers. So let me push this off the spoon, get all of that extra stuff. And then what we're going to be doing is kind of a push and fold with the dough, which starts out, you just push, and then you're going to fold the ingredients in. This is going to give you the nice flaky layers. Just like in a biscuit, it's going to give you a flaky layer. You don't want to knead your dough. You want to do a push and a fold. Kneading it will give you a hard scone. So don't think of it like Play-Doh. I'm trying to think, if you're folding a piece of paper, you're bringing up the edges, we're going to lift it over and push it in. Every fold creates a beautiful layer. So we've got this. Perfect. And you see how it all just starts to incorporate into each other? Lovely. Now I'm going to break this into 2 circles because we're going to make our 2 mounds, because this is going to make about 16 smaller scones. You could do a bigger scone and just cut it into 8s, and then it would take a lot longer to bake in the oven. And so we're going to do smaller ones that will bake a little bit faster. And it's just nice to have a little bit of a smaller scone to eat versus a huge one. That's kind of like a big commitment, especially if you're just grabbing it as a snack. There we go. So we're pushing it out to around about 1 inch thickness in here. There we go. And now I've got my baking sheet over here. This is a big baking sheet. It's like 1.5 sheets. I love big baking sheets because you can fit a lot on there. We're going to layer it with some parchment paper. If you haven't switched to parchment paper, if baking or cooking, do it. You'll love it. It's such an easier cleanup. You have a nice consistent bake on it. So we're going to just slide this under, and then we're going to transfer this whole little puck, I should say, over here. And then we'll cut it once it's on our parchment paper. So I'm just using my pastry cutter to slide under it. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you could use a spatula. It would go under it just fine. And now we're going to cut this into 8 equal sections. So first we're going to divide it in half. Here you're getting your math in today. We're doing our fractions. And then we're going to divide our half again into half to make fourths. And with a pastry cutter, it's just nice. It cuts all the way through, but like a nice big knife would work well. And perfect. So we're going to cut through all the way. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of pull and separate them apart a little bit. This allows their insides to cook faster instead of just getting like an overcooked scone. If you don't pull them apart, your inside will be doughy, but your rest will be hard and crunchy. So we just pull it out, give it a little breathing room. Just like this. Perfect. And then we're going to brush the tops of these with a little bit of cream and sprinkle with sugar. So let me get a small bowl. And you only need about a tablespoon of cream. You don't need much. A little cream goes a long way. So I'm just going to be using, this is like a silicone basting brush. And I'm just going to dip it in my cream and just brush it right over the top. Push that chocolate chip in. There we go. And just right over the top of this. This is going to allow for the sugar that we're going to sprinkle on to stick onto it, as well as give it a nice golden brown color. The cream really will help it turn a nicer color other than being like a pale brown. It's the same thing as if doing like an egg wash or whatnot. So we're just going to brush the cream over the top. And then we're going to sprinkle with a little bit of granulated sugar, or if you have like that thicker decorative sugar, you could use that.
You have a question, is that heavy cream?
Yes, heavy cream. You could use milk too if you had it, but I had the cream out. But it's just essentially like the dairy in it, the fat, and it helps it get a nice golden crust. And then we're going to use just a little bit of sugar, and we're going to sprinkle this over the top of each one. You don't need much. So I'm just going to put it in my hand so I don't get a huge dusting. And we're just going to sprinkle it over. This is just going to give it a nice little sweet crust at the top because scones are not overly sweet. You know, they're like a mix between a cookie and a biscuit. Is like if you've never had one, is like the best way I can describe it. But they're not overly sweet, which is kind of nice about them. But this little extra pop of sugar on the top gives it a nice little thing. So a lot of times I'll also do a nice glaze on the top of a scone, but the chocolate chip ones don't need a glaze. Okay. Beautiful. Give my hands a quick wash, and then we're going to pop these in the oven. Perfect. So I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. And we're going to bake these for about 15 minutes. Your trick is you don't want to overcook them. So always check them before or whatnot. If you're going to do a bigger set of scones, say just 8, then they're going to need to cook for about 25 minutes, a little bit longer. So let me set my timer. We'll do 14 minutes, so I have a minute to get over here and look at it. Now we're going to prep our grilled cheeses, and then we'll feed our sourdough, our starters, since we used to discard, and I used discard yesterday, and get ready to make homemade bread tonight. We're going to use up the rest of ours. We're kind of getting down to scraps on these. We've got one big one left. We're going to be making 3 different grilled cheeses today because when I was in Memphis this weekend, we went to IKEA, and I picked up some Swedish cheeses. So I have präst, svecia, and greve is how I think they pronounce it. So we're going to make 3 different grilled cheeses with these cheeses, and we'll kind of figure out which one we like the best. I'm excited for it because I love cheese any way it comes. My husband, I think he's a little bit more apprehensive, and my parents will love it any way it comes as well. So we're excited. They're pretty big grilled cheeses, so these are just 3 for 4 people. We'll be cutting them up and doing our little taste test to see how they are. Okay. I think I cut this guy a little too thick. That would be a very thick one to cut through. So I'm just going to steal off a little because you don't want to have your bread so thick that it can't heat up the cheese. So we're going to start, and we're going to spread some butter on just one side of each slice of bread. And this is what's going to be on our skillet, and that will crisp up. And I think we'll put that one together. Yeah, we've got this guy. And you want to use room temperature butter. I always leave a stick out because if I don't, it's impossible to spread cold butter on it. And then you have to put the butter on the skillet, which then can lead to the butter burning because of the milk fats or the milk solids in it. And that just it gets it smoky, and it doesn't ever leave a good aftertaste. Okay, so now we have our 3 slices. Now the trick is how we're going to remember which one is in each one. So I'm going to have to do something cool on the top to try to remember it. So this first cheese we're using is svecia, which is a semi-hard ripened cheese with a medium profile. So I'm excited because I love Edam and Gouda and Havarti and all these ones that are really common in Europe. It smells honestly just like an Edam. It doesn't smell 2 things, but we're going to give some nice slices on here. So it's peeling up pretty nice. It's a firmer. It's definitely like not as dry as a sharp cheddar, because sharp cheddar, when it kind of is cooked, it gets like really crumbly. So it's got a nice firmer texture to it. I might have to steal a little taste, see what it tastes like to me. It tastes like an Edam. So that's the svecia. I'm going to do one more slice on there. It's a very kind of mild one. And now we're going to do on this one right here, we're going to do the präst. I'm probably butchering it. My mother would be like, that's not how you say it. And I'm always like, well, you didn't teach me Swedish. The only Swedish I know is I know a couple foods. I know how to say like family names, like grandmother, aunt. And then I know the cuss words because that's what my mom said. I feel like you learn those languages in any foreign language. This is a semi-hard ripened cheese with a medium as well. They taste very similar. This one's a little bit more mild. It's actually kind of a mix between a cheddar and a Gouda. You can kind of get that cheddar-y feeling to it. It's really delicious. There we go. And this is our präst. And then we have, this is a soft cheese. So this is, it's spelled greve, but I think it's called greve. Greve. Got to get the little, if you've ever heard Swedish, it has a very sing-songiness to it. This one feels like a mild cheese or a semi-soft cheese. There we go. We'll cut through. You can see this one's a lot more floppy, so you can tell it's going to have, this one's going to melt much nicer than our harder cheeses, or I will say it will melt quicker. And we'll give it a little taste, see how it is. That one actually kind of tastes like a provolone. And we're going to coat these guys up. And perfect. Let's do one more on there. I'm going to turn on my skillet so we can start the cooking process on here while we finish it up. So I'm going to start with a kind of a 7, a medium high, and then we'll turn it down. Now, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to mark these with, so we know. I'm going to just grab some good old basil leaves. That way I can identify each one. So we're going to do this one on here for the G, for the greve. And then we'll do 2 on this one.
You have a
Fourth.
What's better, hard or soft cheeses?
Soft cheeses will melt at a much faster rate. But I think it comes down to personal preference, to be honest. Hard cheeses are aged longer and have more of a tartar flavor to them, I would feel, where softer cheeses are more creamy and milky. And again, it comes down to like personal preferences. I like more of the soft cheeses. I love a butter queso, Havarti, those types of things. But mozzarella is a soft cheese. But I do like Edam's and stuff. So I like the softer ones. But my husband, he likes the more firm cheeses. He loves a cheddar or sharp cheddar.
Are those going to fall off when you flip?
No, because I pushed them into the butter. They'll crisp up.
You got a comment that they really like your pan.
Oh, thank you. This is my, this is a hex-clad non-stick griddle. So it's like the griddle pan or the things. I think it's like a 10, 12 inch maybe. It's a big one. I love it. I got it on a deal when I bought my set from them. I think I have it in my store front there. They have like a good sale on it. But I love it. I've had it for 2 years, not scratched it yet. And I use it almost every single day because I use it for pancakes and for like French toast, grilled cheese, anything that I want to, that doesn't have a lot of juices.
What was the first cheese called?
The first cheese was, I'm going to put them in my order right here. The first cheese was the svecia, which is, this one is a firm cheese. And then we had the präst and then the greve. But this one, these two tasted very similar. This one had, the middle one was a little bit more tart. And I think it was aged longer. If you look at it, it actually has a lot more holes in it than this one. And then the semi-soft one had like no holes in it. Okay, so we've got our grilled cheeses working. Let me get my spatula out. I always use a fish spatula for my grilled cheeses. I rarely use a fish spatula for fish. So we'll have that. But let's feed our sourdough starter so that it will be nice and active and ready tonight for our making loaves of bread. We're going to make a traditional one, and I'm still thinking about which one to do as my specialty. I always make 2 at a time, and I like to be creative. Last week, I made a Gouda, black pepper, and thyme, and it was like my husband absolutely loved it. He was like, this is the best bread I've had of all time. It just was so, like the Gouda wasn't overpowering, and the black pepper made you think of like when you go to those Italian restaurants and they give you the olive oil with the black pepper in it and the herbs and stuff. It gave you that, but without having the olive oil and stuff. So it was just really lovely. Okay, we're going to feed them. I used my discard from here yesterday, and I used from here, so we need to replenish them both. And that we need them to be nice and active to make our breads tonight. So I'm going to give them each 10 tablespoons of unbleached all-purpose flour. You got to use unbleached, otherwise it will not. They won't have the right enzymes in it to like get the fermentation process on it. So that's 4, 5, 6. I really can't count and talk at the same time. 7, 8, 9, and 10. And so right now my sourdough starters are unactive because I haven't fed them in 2 days. So in order for me to make my bread, I need to feed it like, I would say 4 to 8 hours beforehand to make the best rise out of it. You can go a little bit longer, but I don't find that it always turns out. There we go. You see, I'm keeping track of my fingers because otherwise I won't remember how many scoops I put in there. Okay, so I've got 10 tablespoons of flour in each one. For those of you who don't know, a tablespoon has 15 milliliters in it, which means I just need to add 150 milliliters of water to each one. Easy math. That's why I do it in 5s and 10s. I'm hearing mine starting to warm up. So we're going to do our first flip of 4. We're going to do 3 more flips after this. The first one is really just to start the melting process, get the bread nice and warmed up, and start the cheeses going. And then I'm going to rotate my skillet because I find that this edge cooks hotter than this edge. Okay, let me get my thing for the water. So these are like the cheapest little cups ever. They came with my plastic tubs that I store everything in, but I love them because we have like the American Standard measurements on here, which are the cups as well as the fluid ounces. Then we have over here, we have the metric system, which is great for baking because you actually use the metric system a lot in baking. And then right here in the back, you have both right next to each other. So it makes it really easy to do both types of recipes. And they're just super convenient. So we're going to add 150 milliliters of water to each one because we added 150 milliliters of flour. So you do half and half on the feeding schedule. Let's see. Okay, we're going to stir this and then I'll pour this one in there. I can do that now. We'll stir it. And then we'll cover with a cheesecloth and let it get nice and active on our counter. And you're ready. I will tell you, if you're new to sourdough baking and you're just starting out on your starter, in the wintertime, it takes a little bit longer for your starter to get to the right fermentation process. It takes a little bit longer because your house is colder. If your house is warmer, it speeds up a bit faster. Just think about heat as being a catalyst to make things go a little bit faster. So, like when we got back from vacation. See, there's got my 2 on there to remember. And there we go. Now we're going to do the nice golden color for both sides. You stay there. Can't prove my husband right. There. And turn this down just a little bit. So when we got back from our vacation, we went on a cruise. It was like the kids' Christmas present. And we like to go on a cruise like every 2 years. I forgot to put my starter in the fridge before we left because it was right after Christmas and we were rushing. And so after our 10-day trip, it was molded and it was no bueno. So I had to just throw it out and start over. And it took a little bit longer before I want to say it took 10 days before I had a nice fermentation on it to make a bread. I tried to make a bread a little too early and it just was too dense and gummy. It just wasn't right. But about a week later, I was finally in perfect bread mode. And then it's been going strong since then. It's always a sad day when your starter dies. But that's the moral. Make sure you put it in the fridge to keep it because it can go about up to 10 days between feeding. I hear our oven beeping for our scones, so let's go check those out. So I always give myself an extra minute to get over there. And I'm going to turn this down just a little and get out my pot holders. Beautiful. Perfect. You've got the nice golden edge on them. You see the cracking down the middle. You don't want to wait until they're all brown because then you'll overcook them and then they will be dry. Nice golden edges is what you want. And because the residual heat from the pan will cook them a little bit longer, but this is perfect. So many people overcook like brownies, scones, biscuits because they're waiting for the super golden brown. You want it just barely. And that is going to be the perfect thing. Let me give my grilled cheeses over here a flip. Oh, perfect. We've got a nice golden crust coming up. Lovely. I can see this one had the soft cheese on it and it's already starting to melt the best. This one is actually kind of looking like Parmesan cheese when it melts, and more dried and oily. Okay, let's see. Look at this rolling there. So we've got these stirred up, nice, thick. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a little bit of in here because when you have a nice, good starter, once you feed it, it is going to bubble up. And I didn't have a lot of room at the top. And you can ask sometimes my kids will come in there like, what's going on? The thing will have like bubbled out and over the jar because I had it too much, too high. And then you have extra cleanup. So I'm like making sure I have a good couple inches below the tip of mine so that it doesn't explode. And now we're going to put our cheesecloth on top of each one, and we're going to put them back on the counter. I was reading about a story, of course, in Sweden. You got to love my ancestry. But they actually have a starter hotel where you can drop off your sourdough starter where you go on vacation. And they will feed it and take care of it. And now, call me crazy, but ingenious, whoever started that out. But the Swedes are very, very into their bread. Look at this one. You can tell this cheese, the semi-soft, it melts so nicely. So I'm going to say that the greve for it, this one you can tell not quite as melting as nicely. It's more of a dry. This one is the semi and it has a nicer melt on it. Okay, we're going to leave these two on there for just a hot second. This guy I'm going to take off on our plate because he is ready. But that's what I say for grilled cheeses. You want softer things because Parmesan will just never melt right in your grilled cheese. But like I will say, mild cheddars, super sharp cheddars don't work as well. Here we go. We're getting a little melt on there. It takes a little bit longer for these two because they are a semi-hard. But like more of not the super sharp or the super aged cheddars, those take longer because they're a bit dried out. But Havarti, Butterkäse, mozzarella, mild cheddars, American if you like it, they all work really well because they melt much faster. Okay, these guys are almost ready to come off, but we can do our first. Let's see. Our scone should be nice enough for me to be able to pick up one. So this is our nice chocolate chip scone. You see we've got a nice crust on the bottom. You can see the flaky layers in there, not too hard. And then just look, you've just got these beautiful kind of dense things. When you overcook a scone or you overmix it, both of those lead to really hard scones, and nobody wants a hard scone. Delicious. It's like, it's similar to a cookie, but not as sweet. It's just lovely. Okay, these guys, they're sticking together. Perfect. Beautiful. Now, we'll let him cook for the last second. And here is our grilled cheese 3 ways. So this one with a nice supple was the greve. This one that had none on it was the svecia, and then this one was the präst, which I feel like that was the one that was the middle consistency of it. So let's pull through. We'll show you first our beautiful. Now we're going to do a cut through and see how the cheese pulls are on here. So this was for that semi-soft, you see, beautiful cheese pull. Perfect for grilled cheese. This was a medium one. It melted, but not quite as nice. That's kind of like what you get if you use like an aged, super aged cheddar or Parmesan, one that's not really meant for melting. And this one had a pretty nice melt on it too. So we are excited to do our taste test. We'll have to let you guys know which one's the best. And we're done. Well, guys, thank you for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live shows every single day, like a lunch and a dinner or a breakfast and a dinner. Kind of just showing you guys what we eat and different recipes that I make. If you have any cooking questions or any recipes you'd like to see us make, feel free to message us or send us a comment, and I'd love to try those out for you guys. Thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.